So I'll get started. Filmmaking Fundamentals. This workshop built these slides to just kind of give a higher level overview of what video productions is. Okay, we talked a little bit about myself. That's the bio. You just heard it. You don't have to read it. So yes, I was in the military for 8 years, and I purposely joined to be a documentary filmmaker with the Navy, and to get to that point, I had to become what my superiors called a good photographer before they would send me to those schools. And so I did what was necessary. I learned the skills, and along the way, uh, I saw that we had an aerial photography or aerial videography position, and so I threw myself into that and did the training necessary. And I'll tell you what, that might have been one of the coolest things, to fly off an aircraft carrier's flight deck, and it usually in a helicopter, and doing operations. And one of the coolest experiences I had was I had to take pictures and videos of the battle group of all the ships and the submarines. And so this this lower enlisted person on the comms telling both the aircraft carrier captain and the helicopter where I want everybody to be. And we were shooting and staying in that position, uh, and everybody's on the comm saying, "Okay, now are you done? Are we done? And we're done." And everybody's coming full speed ahead. And I just had in my mind, this is my shot, and I want my shot. And they were all waiting on me to say, "Can we please hard bank?" And finally, I got my shot, and we did. And it was like a sideways carve right away from the battle group. And it's just kind of how I proceeded throughout that career was just focusing on I knew what story I was trying to capture in that picture. I knew the angle that I wanted to capture, that I wanted that battle group to have this power and presence coming towards me. Throughout time, then took on other additional responsibilities and went to some more advanced trainings in video productions, broadcast journalism. Then had the privilege of becoming a what's called a combat cameraman. And by that time, I was solely video productions, so assigned to that video unit. And most of the time, it was going on joint exercises, shooting smaller documentaries within a month. So we did that in a short turnaround, which which y'all have that situation right now. We've got a month for you to shoot your story, put it together, and submit it. But I know you can do it. I do. I know you can do it. Towards the end of that duty station, I deployed to Iraq with the U.S. Army's infantry, and that experience required me to essentially become Army. I had to do all the weapons training. I had to become strong enough to carry all that gear on patrols and in convoys, and that's not something you do in the Navy. But I knew in my mind what stories I wanted to capture, and so to me it was worth it. uh, and in that experience, deciding on two different stories that I wanted to tell. One story was this soldier. He is a two-time survivor of testicular cancer, but he didn't want to leave his guys behind. If he's going to train them for deployment, he's going to go with them. And I recognized that story, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, can I follow you around on all these different missions?" That's what we did. The other one was what a combat documentary is. It's a singular incident, and being in that moment and shooting what's happening at the same time, listening at the same time, crafting a story at the same time, shooting for my final edit. Unfortunately, I had enough experience coming up to that point where I had those skills and I had that muscle memory. And what happened was there was this explosion, and I was with the medical unit, and there's just rules of engagement, and it was a local thing, and they're not supposed to engage, but they kept asking for help and asking for help. And finally, this doctor said, "Forget it. I don't care if I get in trouble. I'm going to go help these people. And he turned to me because at that point, that relationship had been built. He says, you're coming with me. Let's go capture it. So just zeroing in on that event and keeping my eyes around the environment, looking for all the different sequencing. We'll talk about those skills here later. Looking for all the different elements and angles, and at the same time listening for sound bites that I wanted to layer to put together for that piece. And so capturing that whole picture of trying to save this little girl and moving this little girl to the vehicles, and then moving her to a helicopter, and then sending her off on a helicopter to go get advanced medical care. And those were the pieces that I won with. Um, and so my background isn't. I didn't grow up in ag. I didn't. My profession is not ag. My previous professions are not agriculture, but I kind of equate the combat experience to herding cattle and bringing cattle into a corral and trying to control them and separating the calves from their mothers and then giving them shots and all the different movements going on in there, that you have to have situational awareness, like top level situational awareness, or you can get hurt. Like safety is paramount at that time, and having someone watch your back and having someone make sure that you're safe and you can take that picture. And I'll tell you that first and foremost, safety, especially in the work that you do, over the past couple of years, I've become more familiar with how you do business, and how much work goes into it, but it's also very serious. It was also very serious work. And so thinking about that safety, and that's kind of how I relate all that I've been able to achieve in the past to helping you guys tell your story in this way. Okay, so visual storytelling. These are all the things we're going to cover, but let me tell you right now, what I want you to do is not take notes. That's what I want you not to do. I have already compiled resources. I already have an outline. There's a couple more things I want to add to it before I put it into the Google Drive, and I've built this folder full of resources. I don't want you to write notes right now of what I'm saying. What I want you to do is to think of the stories you want to tell. And as you learn about these skills, it will spark you to think, oh, this technique can help me capture this or help me capture that. So think about the stories. Think about the legacy that you want to give authenticity to. So yes, these are the things we're going to cover very rapidly, but just keep focused on that. The only thing I want you to write down is the stories that come to mind. Production timeline. So here's the nuts and bolts of how it works. Story, idea generation. We're going to brainstorm. That's kind of what you're doing throughout this. You're going to brainstorm ideas and what are the different stories that you want to tell. And then it's going to take planning before you just run and gun and shooting, without training, like I described with going into that combat situation. I had muscle memory up to that point, so I was ready. That's not to say that you are not familiar with the environment of your farms, of your ranches, of the all the different moving parts, but something that you don't have is the familiarity with the equipment. And so thinking ahead and planning, okay, how do I want to tell the story? How do I want to capture it? And so then the next part is shooting. We'll talk about all the different angles. And then we go into edit. That's something that we are going to be very brief about because it can be very complex. Fortunately, in the playlist that I built, you'll be able to kind of pick and choose where you want to go with that. And we'll talk about keeping it simple. Okay. So a good story can spark something in your audience, can inspire them to think differently, act on something they believe in, or simply entertain them in a way that leaves a lasting impact. So sparking that change, sparking that connection, helping other people think differently and make that impact that endures. So the impact of storytelling, they connect, they educate, they engage. In connection, we're creating empathy, and we're learning about diversity ourselves and relatability, historical events, social issues, raising awareness. So in your context, a big, especially since we're talking about growing up on the farm, and we'll probably do a lot of stories with kids. One of the big criticisms that I know you face is that misunderstanding about child labor. I mean, everybody has opinions about that, and when they see kids, they want to clump it into all one thing, and that's not what is happening in your real world. And so the world needs to be educated on why it's important for kids to learn how to work on a farm, what they actually learn, and in the process, we're not just engaging other people, we're also engaging that child. I'm a mother, I have a 3-year-old toddler, and he is full on, and I can't wait till I can farm, pun intended, farm him off to somebody to teach him these skills. And the last thing I want to say about engage is when you're shooting a film, you move closer to that subject, and you become involved, and it becomes a part of you, for better or for worse. Uh, and what I see an opportunity for is you're sitting down and you're talking to a child, and you're asking them these questions about safety, right? About working on a farm. And what they have all the time is dad's yelling at me, telling me this, mom's yelling at me, telling me this, do this, do this, do this. But in that moment, you're giving them an opportunity to take ownership of that answer, because now they have to think about it. So you're not just capturing the legacy, you're now prolonging the education of that story throughout, and having them absorb and instill it in themselves. Okay. So building emotional connections, resonating with viewers on a deeper level. This has an opportunity to make complex ideas more accessible and easier for the audiences to grasp. And when you tell with honesty, you're not just making a film, you're creating experience for your subjects, as well as creating experience for those watching. All right, so why tell your story? Why your story? I started with talking about children being misunderstood, but let's think about other things that they're misunderstood about your work and your life and your generations. What does water actually mean to you? I'm not going to dig deeply into politics, but it is a thing. It is a stressor. What does that mean to you? What is the story behind water? What do water rights mean to you? What does it mean? Does your family, do your kids understand what that means? Or the life of the soil? What do you see in the soil? What is your connection with the soil? There's an identity linked to what you do and what you have, that the world needs to be educated, and they need to have that emotional connection. And your perspective is invaluable. I know it's the daily grind. Like, well, I don't know what I'm going to tell a story. I just do this. This is my job. But if you think out, take a step outside what is to you, and things that frustrate you, that you wish people are understood, there's an opportunity for a story there. All right, let's get into some nuts and bolts. Shooting essentials, pre-production. So we talked about creating the story, coming up with the story, and the story arc, beginning, middle, and end. So we want to have that. Exploring the dynamics, digging into relationships, maybe beginning, middle, and end of a relationship changing or transitioning. And then shaping light. Really, bad lighting can make good gear look really, really cheap. And you can make something look fantastic with the most simple household items. And I'll talk about that in a second. So lighting creates mood, highlights important details, guides the attention, and the goal is to enhance every aspect of the story that you're telling. And then shooting for the edit. What does that mean? You will need more shots than you think you do. And I'll talk about sequencing, I'll talk about different angles, but you will need to think, okay, if this shot doesn't match with another shot, it's going to just be very disjointed when you put together in editing. So planning your shot keeps the editing process in perspective, leads to more coherent and visually appealing final results. So create that shot list. Okay, overview of equipment. 4 essentials. Lighting, so differentiate between natural and artificial light. Use some do-it-yourself stuff, and maybe if you have access to some professional stuff, just kind of, it is an opportunity to be creative with lighting. Microphone, I cannot stress how important sound is. I'll get deeper into that in a second, but sound is pretty crucial for the audience to remain engaged and to be able to hear. Camera, that can include your smartphones. Most of you will probably be shooting with less expensive gears and smartphones, but they have the same features as a lot of the other higher end equipment. So that's not going to be a limitation. And then stability, gimbals, tripods, do it yourself, making sure you have smooth shots and having purpose to that. Sometimes it makes sense to be kind of handheld. If you're riding on a horse, the horse moves. So it makes sense if there's a little bit of movement. But having the camera all over the place, it makes it very difficult for the audience to keep focused on the story. All right, so camera settings and basics. Let's see. That's a picture. Can you see my mouse? Anybody? I don't know if you can see my mouse. That's okay. So, okay, good. The massive mouse. Okay. So we've got the settings. These settings are different menus. You can have access to that on the phone as well as the back of the camera. And these different options, you've got things like these green lines telling you if things are in focus or your color's right. All these different options, and you are only as good as you are comfortable. So spend time getting to know your interface, and the specific parts of those settings kind of rest on these 3 elements. So resolution. Widescreen is at the least 1080p by 1920. So it's 1920 by 1080. Okay. Anything less than that, you will end up having to blow it up and you'll lose detail, and we'll work with the best we have. If you have equipment that only shoots 720, it'll just be a little harder for you to clean it up in editing. Or 4K. 4K is a great medium to capture enough detail and be able to, if you needed to zoom in a little bit, like cheating in the edit, then you have a little bit of leeway. And shooting at 4K and then editing at 1080, then you have the opportunity to move the frame around or kind of stabilize it. Let's say there's too much shake, you can stabilize it. Frames per second, how fast the camera takes pictures. And you would think that a slower number would mean slow motion, but it's the opposite. There's something called persistence of vision. Well, you have 24 pictures that are lasting, that kind of, they blend in not as well as a 60. When you slow it down, then you have more pictures in that frame to put on the timeline. So 24 or 30, especially if you have sound. 60, most cameras, you won't be able to record sound with that, so you have nothing but slow motion. And slow motion overdone is kind of irritating. So be very choosy with the slow motion that you do choose. And there's a way that you can speed up the slow motion to make it fit within the 24 frames per second. It's happened. I've done it before, not changing my settings, and I had to fix it. But I had no audio, so that was fun. Color temperature. Color temperature is in the morning or inside, you've got some cooler lights depending on the light bulbs. Outdoor, you have more warmer tones. And you have to look at make the camera see what you see. It can't do that on its own. If you have it on auto, what you'll end up seeing, and it'll be quite frustrating, that the camera will shoot in and out of these white bounces. Now it's cold, now it's blue, now it's yellow, and it just keeps cycling and cycling, and that's very distracting when you're putting that piece together. So these three things, get in and set them where they need to be before you start shooting. Okay, lighting essentials. This is fun. I think lighting is very fun. You can just completely change the tone of an environment, and with lighting, or with negative lighting. Some people feel that to light a scene, it requires adding more lights. But sometimes all you need to do is remove light and let other light become the dominant part. So we're controlling the intensity, the contrast, harsh shadows versus soft shadows. All of these steps, all of these points convey meaning, contribute to what the story is that you're trying to tell. If you have a scene that's kind of very serious, you might want, I mean, it's not this case every time, maybe having less light and more shadows contributes to that. Where if a kid, there's just someone who's very exuberant and is high energy, maybe add some more lights. Right here, this is a basic three light setup. So you have the key light, which is the brighter light, fill light, and the fill light is less because shadows are pleasing. It's pleasing to the eye. It creates depth instead of having a two-dimensional image that you typically see on Zoom or anywhere. The camera only sees it very flat. So if you add a little bit of shadow, then you create depth. And then backlight or hair light helps separate the subject from the background. Right here is a do-it-yourself DIY solution. Those are foam boards and poster boards, and all he has is one light. And by shaping the light around him, you can simulate that 3-point lighting, creating that depth. So here we have an example that is accessible to someone without a lot of gear. When you're shooting outside, optimally shooting outside, there's times called golden hours. So in the morning until about 10 a.m., and then in the afternoon, starting at 2:30 through sunset. In the evening, you have more warm lights and soft shadows. Same thing in the morning, but it's cooler. So thinking about how are you going to shoot that matches the lighting situation. But sometimes you're stuck with what you have, and something's happening during that period of time in the middle of the day. So how do we deal with the harshness of the light and the directness? And you can do that with things like reflectors or diffusers, maybe a piece of parchment paper to make the light just kind of spread out, or reflecting. You've got the harsh sun over here, just beaten down, but if you put a reflector, then you can fill in some shadows. And right here, let's talk about a practical example. This is where I'm sitting right now, and I wanted to keep it as simple as possible to show you that you can do this with stuff that is at home. I do have fancy lights, but that wouldn't serve you to show you a big production. So I wanted to use things that I had accessible, or things that you can get at Walmart, or at that you can get at like Home Depot or Lowe's. And what I have set up back here is this is actually my key light. So this is my key light right here, and I have it reflecting off a foam board and a poster, and I just got some 3M tape and sticking up to the wall. Right here is my fill light. I just have one of those bedside lamps with a bulb in it, And then right here, there you go. What you can see right here, this is what you can do with someone if they say to you, "Oh, I look too old on camera. I have a bunch of wrinkles, or I have this double chin thing going on," and you want to take some years off them. You want to put it's like a beauty light to just bounce up and fill in some shadows to brighten up the space. And what I have right here is a white sheet to bounce the light up. That's not. I didn't really like that. I think it's too much for right now, so I kept it off. So that's the bounce right here. And this is just a regular light that I put two different bulbs. And let me tell you about these two bulbs. So these two bulbs and that fill light right there. What that is this. Can't really see my camera, so I'm going to trust that you can see this. This is the Sync Reveal HD Smart Bulbs. So I can adjust the colors in these. I can adjust the color temperature, whether I want it warm or whether I want it cold. And so I matched that one as best as I could to that one. And then those two in the back, I the red and the blue to separate the background and give interest. So that's something you can do as well, is change the color just by buying some regular bulbs and using your phone to adjust it. Just at the regular grocery store, and you can set this up and changing the lights to contribute to the mood or contribute to the character that you're shooting. And what I don't have this picture, because I decided to do it this morning, is I put parchment paper around the blue bulb because I felt like the red was encroaching too much on the blue, and I wanted to have a little bit of separation between the two different colors. I just thought it was neat and wanted to show you that it's up to your creativity how you want to shape light to tell your story. All right. Next, composition essentials. Okay. I know I stress down and I'm going to stress it again. But the truth is, 75% of people watch their mobile videos on mute with closed captions. So, but, not but, 90% is of the information is better absorbed through visuals. The brain is involved in processing visual stimuli, and almost half are impacted and they retain information when it's moving. And I just wanted to, these are some examples of, a composition that I'll talk about in a second with kids and with family, different angles and framings and leading lines. So let's talk about that right now. Direction of attention. So let me go back here for a second. Direction of attention. This young man is looking this way. And so what we have an opportunity to do is shoot another shot of what is he looking at? And then we can shoot another shot after that of, oh, he's looking at this, and you start to build a story. This right here, getting down to the height of that boy, where he's at in his perspective, and having that framing, having those lines lead to him. Right here, there's a couple leading lines. The direction is over here, but what you see is a asymmetrical balance. So we've got that. What's pleasing in there is you have the bags on both sides. You have framing going on. You have soft light, depending on whatever time of day. I can't tell what it is. It's just a principle of balance and framing. So let's talk about that. Leading lines directing the viewer's gaze toward the focal point. Enhances visual flow. You're guiding the light guides, composition guides, sound guides, so that they're following you in the story that you want to tell. Rule of thirds is a basic principle for composition, where we're going to divide the frame into 9 different squares and put our subject, our points of interest, at the intersection of those lines. And it's just something mathematically that happens in our brain. There's other types of overlays that you can do to help you see that, but at the basic rule of thirds is where we want to start. So let's look at some examples. I took these pictures that I found. These lines were not on them. I took lines from elsewhere, some other picture, and I superimposed them on the photo, kind of to test them. Okay, this is very pleasing to my eye. Let's see how well the photographer, the videographer, utilized those principles to tell a story within that frame. Right. So you're looking at the lines. Uh, this is a symmetrical balance. You have every single uh, what do I call it? Like a quadrant has something specific in it. So in the top quadrant, you also have the line that is straight across the horizon, so helping you keep from kind of skewing the angle. Let me just say, these are rules, and rules can be broken once you understand or know how to purposely break them. Let me just put that. You're not stuck to this, but you don't know how to creatively bend until you understand the rules to begin with. And then we've got leading lines, we've got the framing between the two poles, and typically it's not best practice to put things right in the center, but everything else around is leading towards her as the focal point, and her direction and her focus on the serenity of that picture. Okay. Right here, we are looking at natural light flowing in. So this photographer is utilizing the natural light. You've got the eyes lined up on one of the lines intersecting the direction that she may be looking down, but the direction the light is pulling her out towards, and you can tell a story about this photo, maybe pulling her towards the next stage in her life. So you've got the middle smaller uh, quadrant, her hand, her hair. There's just a softness about that, which is complemented by the light, and her eye, and everything on the right side gives it with the blurry background, gives it some depth and emotion. Right here, what this drew me into was not only his eyes are just pointing, sideways, which is hilarious, but this is what you see as asymmetrical. Not only do you have asymmetrical balance, but you also have framing. So you have the calves in the background in the lower portion. You have if you had nothing up in the top quadrant, you'd have empty dead space, and that's not as pleasing. But here we have the cow's eyes right there on the top left, and then the other one down in the top right. But it is clear who our focus and our subject is this character right there on the left. Right here. Okay. Again, framed right there on the lines, pretty basic. But why I picked this one, because you have foreground, you have things in the foreground that are creating depth. You have those leaves and those flowers creating atmosphere, and so then you feel more close to the subject in this scene, in this experience, because of those layers of depth. And again, if it wasn't for the top two quadrants having something, we would have some dead space. Let's see. This one. All right. So at the outset, it's what are we doing here? Why did I pick this one? You got it's dead center. But if you take a step back and you look at the colors, you can see that eye is framed by the different colors in the manes of the other horses, and the sun coming down over the top of the horse. And what we see is we're focusing on that very kind eye of that horse. And if you sequence that in with other shots, you can create depict the character of that horse, and the personality of it. But just framing is not just objects. Framing can also be colors. Right here, you've again the rule of thirds. You've got the light coming down from the top, spilling onto the horses, but you've also got a little bit of framing there on the bottom right of those two horses. There's a little bit of framing with the other horse, but it's not not as symmetrical, not as balanced as down there on the bottom. So taking advantage of that light, that it, there are choices to be made when you're shooting into the light, and I think they did a really good job of capturing the tonality of that scene. This one is just like dead on, like simple, but still very powerful. The simplicity in it, think about the simplicity in it and the story that it conveys, and how that juxtaposed with other simple, slower moving shots can create the atmosphere, can create the personality of your life. The open skies, the open plains. And you're out there. You're out there all day. So let's capture it in a way that people can feel the expanse of your meditative experience. Okay, I'll go with that one. All right, let's play the boring to better game. Right here. Okay, yeah, we have a family, but we don't have depth in that. There's no foreground, background, and there's just not direction. There's not a story that you can interpret from it. Are they going left, or are they going right? Why is the family there? There's just so many questions because there's nothing telling us what the story actually is. Whereas right here, this cuts off. It was a wider shot. All of these are squares. I didn't know it was going to be squares. It was a wider shot. So you've got a generational moment between probably a grandfather and a grandson, and they are moving towards the cattle. So I can surmise that we have an opportunity where this little boy is going to learn about years of experience, learn how to respect the cattle, how to move around them, how to be safe. And how are we going to capture shots around that one picture to tell that story? Right here. Okay, we're getting eggs, but we've got like direct flash, direct light coming right on here, and it's just kind of messy. I don't see there isn't personality right there, and maybe we can take that shot and build upon it in different ways, and shooting the shots around that. But I don't. It's jarring because again, there's no direction. It's just very harsh. Whereas right here, you can see his personality. You can see his joy in this experience. Oh, I better be careful with these eggs. Why are these eggs so important? Why does he need to be safe and grip onto those eggs, which is meat hooks, small little meat hooks right here. So we're in fair season. Lots of fairs, lots of competitions, lots of auctions. So you understand this scene, but someone who's on the outside just doesn't really understand why he's doing what he's doing. What is leading to the next step? What was the step before? And there's no layering and no depth to it. Whereas right here, you can see the intensity of his focus. Both of them, the two boys right there, the intensity of his focus, the size of those of that cattle in relation to his height, but he's got a confidence about him. Why is he so confident? What's his story? Are these his? And how does he command the relationship with those animals? There's a lot of good questions that you can tell a story. All right, we've got this picture of a little girl. She's looking at a cow. What's the cow going to do? What's the girl going to do? Where are we going with this? It's a good establishing shot to establish the environment, but again, you're looking at some really harsh lighting. Whereas in this shot, it cuts off. I apologize. There is a moment between the two of them. There is a connection, her smile on her face, and his intent, his or her, I don't know, intense stare, trying to figure each other out, trying to figure her out. Okay, so where are we? I want to know what's next. I'm not just asking questions because I don't know what's next. I want to know what's the next step in this relationship and why is she so fascinated. So we talked about sequencing. Sequencing is the use of scenes or a series of scenes to form a distinct narrative unit around taking multiple shots within one situation to create continuity, to create montages. So there are basic shots, wide, medium, close up. So wide, whoop, capturing everybody, capturing the scene. Medium, you're zeroing in on the action, and close up, you're showing details and picking the right details that contribute to telling that story. The hands working with with the bales, right? Or putting shoes on the horse, and the nails and the muddy hands working the muddy boots, things like that. And then there's something called a cutaway, that you can cut away to something that isn't necessarily what's in the action, but it does contribute and helps bridge and helps move us forward to the next scene. And so, very basically, a basic way of moving through scenes: wide, medium, close up, or wide, close up, medium, medium, wide, close up. Do a cutaway or a wide shot of the vista, and then go on to your next scene. So wide, medium, close up. Then we can do an extreme close up of the dirt in the fingernails. And looking at that and think, wow, that has been there for a very long time, maybe even years. The dirt in the cracks of the hand. Cutaways, we talked about that. Extreme wide, showing the expanse of the land. Cutaway, I put that twice on my list. Symmetrical, asymmetrical, playing around with the balance. Okay, next one. All right, so we got these two shots. One, very harsh shadows. It's a profile shot, so it's very one-dimensional. Like I don't see, I can't see much about the character because I can't see all around him. It's just this almost silhouette shape, and everybody, the horses and this scene is just very stationary and flat and lifeless. Whereas on the right side, we have some soft shadows. We've got dynamic bodyling, depth of, we'll talk about depth of field. And right there, you can see his dimples in his face. So in the foreground, we're we're working with cattle right now, but they're not the main subject. The man in the back is the subject, and he's either just laughed at some joke over on the left hand side, or he's enjoying himself. It's like, okay, so tell me why he's emoting that way. Whereas on the other one, it's I don't really know what we're doing. Like, who's my subject? Whose story am I telling? I think it's his. It's not terrible, but we can make this better by rotating ourselves around in another angle, doing the sequencing of wide, medium, close ups. What is he looking at? Okay, depth of field. This can get a little very scientific and detailed. So, in essence, depth of field is where something is in focus and where something is not in focus. And with less focus, you can zero in on one part of the subject. Whereas in a wider shot, it's helpful because you're trying to show all the details. So you want to have a larger depth of field, so depth of that focal field. All right. And we talked about safety. That starts to remind me to make sure I talk about safety. Sound. Ooh, sound. Sound can make or break a movie, a film, a video. I know I talked about the 75% of people watch their videos on mute, and there is sound in our light. There's a very, I'm sorry, I'll get like way off metaphorical explanations of all that. I apologize for that. Anyway, so impact of great sound, it will set the tone. It will evoke emotion. It will enhance the storytelling by being very choosy and particular about the sounds that you emphasize or the sounds that you cut away. Even in this point, silence can be used strategically and build suspense or highlight a moment of reflection. So it doesn't always have to be sound, but if there is no sound, why are you leaving that blank? Okay. Let's see. Rhythm of the sounds can move things along, or it can stop it so that the audience focuses on a point. This right here, layering different sounds to create richness. So when I was what the video that I shot with the doctor, I listened for sounds, and I learned how to do this over time, listening for sounds. That then I would go back and I'd pull out of this timeline and I'd cut it. I'd cut the sound and I'd layer it over here. And so the last sound that you hear is, um, "Do you think she's going to make it?" No, I don't. And I took that, but at least we have to try. So that's who he is as a person. And I took that from elsewhere and put it in that spot. I've got to hurry. All right. So keep the environment quiet. Minimize distractions so that we can focus on it. If you're doing an interview, we can hear what they're saying, and also listening for if it's going to be necessary to use um, closed captioning or subtitles for those pieces. But that's not something we want to rely on. And again, without a lot of resources or money, let's just improvise. Improvise by putting sheets on the wall, by closing the door, or putting the cat in the cage, which I did because the cat likes to bang on my door. And of course, he's going to do that right now. So I had enough foresight to do that. That's what I'm saying. Or just using your regular voice recorder on your phone to capture the audio. And that's important because if you're going to have a depth of field shot and you're going to zoom in on someone as they're talking, the farther away you are from them, the less you'll be able to hear. So maybe having something to capture the sound right where they're at. This microphone actually hooks into a cell phone. So it cost me about $180. And the other end of it, I just hook into the bottom of my cell phone, and I can, gosh, a good like 100 feet, I could be far away from the person, shoot in, and still get clear audio from them. So I wanted, again, use the most inexpensive equipment I can to show you what is possible. All right. Editing. The art of the edit. Edit allows you to control the pace of your story and shape the narrative. So it's the rubber meets the road. You take everything that you captured and you put it down onto something called the timeline. And from there, you manipulate the footage and move shots around to craft the story you're trying to tell. Fortunately, we have different resources. Like we can do this on our phone. We can do it on an iPad. And then if you going into more advanced workflows, there's coloring software where you can go in and really pull details out of the color or mute some others to make the color stand out, to direct the viewer to what you want to tell. All right, so basics of editing. These are best practices. Following this workflow, this is on the outline that will be in the Google Drive. Manage your files, because that is the foundation. If you know where your files are, you're going to save time. So on your computer, stack them, organize them, have them clean. Then import those files in. Again, stack them, organize, and keep it clean. Review the footage, pick and choose, maybe pull shots that you think, that didn't really work, I don't really like it, and put into a different bin. Don't delete it, because you might change your mind later. There might be some audio that you want to layer elsewhere, so just kind of put it off to the side. Slap that stuff down on the timeline. Do not prejudge. Do not think too much into it. Just put it down. And if you really want to cheat or spend some money, there are artificial intelligence tools out there that could do that for you. They come at a premium. You have to pay for them. But if you're really overwhelmed with the editing and you just need a little bit of help, some of the softwares, even the free ones or freemium ones, can help you do that initial rough cut. but you're going to have to do the refining of the sequence and enhancing and cleaning the audio. So then goes into color correcting, and that can be very basic, just contrast, sharpening, clean it up in a subtle way so things stand out. Effects and titles, keep them very minimal because they can be very distracting. Get some feedback. Have someone watch it. That's very vulnerable. It's hard to ask someone to tell you how they feel about your story, but it's important because you get entrenched into what you're doing. You might miss something, and then obviously export, upload, and submit it to the contest. All right, so video editing platforms. I looked at a whole bunch of different options and tried to find the least expensive options that you can use that are simple and have a shorter learning curve than more advanced ones. I do not have experience with Kdenlive, CapCut, or well, I have a little bit of Clipchamp, like very little. But they have a lot of tools that'll help you clean up, whether it's coloring or whether it's CapCut has an AI feature if you want to pay for it to just put it down on the timeline. I use LumaFusion on my phone if I'm going to edit something on my phone, just quick and dirty. Uh, I'm very comfortable with that, but it is very detailed and kind of difficult to zoom in on a phone to do that. It'd be better served on an iPad. What I really edit with is something called DaVinci Resolve, and it's very robust and very detailed. And once you kind of get a hang of how it flows, I feel it has a very natural flow and very comfortable versus Adobe Premiere or Avid or there's so many different higher end ones. And then you could buy the studio package, but you're going to get so much out of just the free version alone. And then wrapping up. Okay. So DIY solutions. Let's talk about, again, let's keep it simple. How can we do this with the limited resources that we have? Even poor execution will make the best gear look cheap, just the same with lighting. Know your gear and learn how to maximize it. Use what you have. Simple tripods, learning the settings, those basic settings right there on the bottom. Budget lighting, these light sticks right here, they're pretty inexpensive, maybe a couple $100, but even still, this is a Home Depot special right here, and you can diffuse that. I do have those. I use them. I do use them alongside my other bigger lights. Just you can kind of, with that one you can bend the aluminum where you want it to go. It doesn't bend back, so you have to buy more. But you can get that from Home Depot. Right here, he's simply using his environment to stabilize his shot. Okay. And then improvised stability. What that person is doing is creating tension to kind of have a kind of a gimbal within his hands. If you pull some tension on that strap, you're less likely to shake around with your hands, and it keeps it taut. You can also have a string on the bottom and pull upward. Okay. I want to show this 60-second clip to show you that you can tell a whole story within 60 seconds. It's difficult. It takes a lot of pre-planning to do that. And if you don't pre-plan enough, you're going to be editing for a very long time. So plan. Know what your story is. And there's this whole YouTube channel called 60-Second Docs. And it's been going on for many years. Some of them are super, super weird. So you've been warned, super weird. But there are some really warm videos that help us relate with our world, with our humanity. Stop me if you can't hear it. You don't hear it? You said you don't hear it? Okay. Hmm. Um, for the sake of time, I'm not going to futz around with my moat box. But this story right here, she's autistic, and I'll try to I'm gonna play, and then I'm gonna translate what's going on. So she's trying to find a way to connect with the world and with humanity, and the best way that she's found how to do that for herself is to raise chickens, and she actually created this book called Chickens to Love, Animal Assisted Learning Program. So she's come up with this program through through raising chickens of how to help other kids like her interact with the world. So again, that's 60 seconds. 60 seconds to tell the story, and we're looking at wide shots and medium shots and a lot of close-ups. I think we could do a little bit better on this one with creating the atmosphere, and without the wide shots, it feels a little claustrophobic. But the point of me showing it is you can build a complete story. It doesn't have to be a montage within 60 seconds. And with that, I am done. Woo! A whole hour, right on the money. Additional resources. You scan this QR code, and what I have with this QR code, it'll take you to the Google Drive. When I'm done cleaning up the video, get the download video, and make sure everything's just kind of tight with the editing. We can upload the video there. I'll store it there as well. But the outline that I have of everything that I've talked about, that I've just blasted through, you can then go through and read the details. And what's in the drive is a shared shortcut that goes straight to the video contest details as well. So you can go in those folders, and it'll take you to the folders where you can drop your videos, and then the form to fill out for the contest.